Welcome to this Automation World video podcast sponsored by Schneider Electric. In this podcast, we'll look at how manufacturers are responding and adapting to new information management capabilities enabled by big data and the Internet of Things. We'll consider the challenges they face, the benefits now available to both engineering departments and management, and how to best approach making any new investments in information management technology. I'm David Greenfield, Director of Content at Automation World, and joining me for this discussion is Paul Shelton, who's responsible for the information management software portfolio at Schneider Electric. So Paul, with all the interest around the industrial Internet of Things, manufacturers are collecting massive amounts of data. And they were collecting tons of data even before these more recent trends. So from your vantage point, with more than 2 decades working in this industry, how do you see this affecting industrial organizations today?
I think it provides an opportunity to transfer or move from kind of a past state, a current state, to a future state, meaning that in a lot of organizations that information is stored across different systems, whether it's in historians or on clipboards or spreadsheets, or is captured with the individuals that are actually running the processes. The big data and IoT now provides an opportunity to take that information and make it available to a wider set of individuals that maybe aren't as experienced with the process but need that information, and making that information available through technologies like cloud-based storage, client tools make it easy to ask questions of the data, make information available on mobile devices. And then I think lastly is also having kind of intelligence built into the systems to make people aware of potential problems that are on the horizon, and ideally be able to prevent those from occurring.
So now that these companies are in the midst of collecting all this data, what are they doing with all of that information?
The interesting thing about data storage in the industrial automation space, it's kind of funny. When people put in historians, as often is the case, they don't know what they're going to need to know. So the normal state is you log everything at an incredibly high fidelity, in the anticipation when they need to look at that information down the road, that they've captured the information that they needed at the fidelity that was necessary to identify and solve the problem. So once they've collected that information, it's not uncommon in some situations. What they do with it is nothing. It's simply there in case they need it. It's somewhat of an insurance policy. I think the current state is you're capturing the information at the fidelity and resolution that you need, looking at these other information sources that aren't just necessarily sensor data, but also the information that comes into these systems from the people that are interacting with it, and capturing those best practices as well, so that they can continue to improve their operation. The value they have in the high fidelity information there, at least the information at the fidelity that somebody needs, is that when an event occurs, which could be a good event, we did something incredibly well, let's figure out what we did right, let's do it again. On the other side, when things go wrong, have the ability to go back and look and see what happened, and then put practices in place to prevent it from happening again.
Now, beyond big data and the Internet of Things, are there other megatrends that you're seeing having effect on industry as it relates to information management?
So as far as megatrends are concerned, clearly software as a service is certainly a trend we've seen in the commercial environment. We've certainly seen that in the industrial marketplace, and now it's coming more into the industrial automation side. Largely for information collection and capturing best practices, making that information available to other users through easier to use client tools to where people can literally ask questions of the data, not necessarily be experts, but have questions that they want answers to, and be able to provide an experience with which they can ask those questions and get meaningful responses. They also can do things like use mobile devices, make that information very readily available through something that's with them largely at all times, and be able to go in and do things like configure alerts, identify things with which they want to be notified if there's a change in state, like the line stopped for more than 10 minutes, or the yield is dropped below a certain level, to be able to be more readily aware of problems that are occurring that are more business related, and be able to take action and respond.
Now, what about predictive analytics? That's been a popular theme for a while that's really been getting a lot of attention as an initial IoT application. Are you seeing any uptick in interest in this as part of industrial information management applications?
Predictive analytics, I think, is a great extension to big data and IoT because now there's so much information being captured. So what are you going to do with it all? So you have to start having some intelligence built into the system to kind of let you know what you don't know. And that's one of the areas I think is fantastic. is having that intelligence built into the systems where people they can identify conditions with which they want to be notified and predictably be able to bring that information available to the right people at the right time.
Now, looking past the trends, what have you seen to be the most significant problem or challenge that industrial organizations face when it comes to their approach to information management?
I think probably the biggest challenge around the information management space is maybe what they've been doing historically has been good enough, and they've been able to be successful organizationally in whatever those measurements might be, depending upon what they're manufacturing and the processes that they're running. I think what a lot of organizations are facing is the way they've been doing isn't good enough now, and they provide an opportunity that they need to do things differently. And I think that's where the information management really comes in. So how do they capture that information that's with people or in databases or disparate data sources, clipboards, spreadsheets, and to try to be context of that information. So to look at the areas with which they've identified that they see an opportunity for improvement and gather the data that allows them to determine what that looks like and be able to start to operate in that mode.
So how does that affect the way companies tackle information management projects?
In terms of looking at these types of information projects, the way they were done in the past and the way they're done now is very different. Historically, it would be a potentially large project with a large scope definition, potentially a large capital expenditure. In today's state, with cloud-based solutions, software as a service, mobility, it can be a lot more reasonable to get going. The time to value is a lot shorter. The flexibility to change scope and look at things that come up that they learn along the way and allow the systems to adapt based upon those learnings. Additionally, the flexibility to look in terms of what their challenges are and make sure that, again, they're trending to that state that shows operational improvement.
So what would you say are the benefits of industrial information management for managers versus engineers and operators?
I think one of the benefits for the different roles in an organization, management, engineering, operators, is that they've all traditionally kind of worked in their own individual parts of the organization. And now they're working off of a common set of information and really bring the organization closer together, make it to where people aren't locked down to desktop applications and systems to do their job. They have the ability and the freedom to have access to a wider body of information, and they have the ability to consume that information in a form factor at a time that's convenient to them, using mobile devices and tablets.
Okay, last question, Paul. Considering all we've discussed here today, what advice would you give to someone looking to invest in information management software today?
Advice I'd give somebody that's looking to invest in information management is to understand what that can mean for improvement organizationally. I think a lot of organizations some have long since come to the conclusion that their current practices aren't sufficient. And the information management is an excellent way to be able to collect that information centrally and make it available to a wider set of users. From an information management perspective, I think what we hear back from a lot of customers is they didn't anticipate some of the benefits. So you go into these projects thinking, oh, we believe that we need to do this because it's going to help us in these areas. Once they've accomplished those tasks, what they realize more often than not is there was a lot of benefits that they didn't anticipate. One of the pieces of advice I give to folks who are working with customers that are looking to invest in information management is the threshold's lower now. The larger organizations that have been able to benefit by putting these systems in place have seen the need and oftentimes put those systems in place long ago. Some of the organizations just didn't have that capacity, either the resources or the capital expenditure capacity to do those things. And I think this makes that technology available to a much wider audience.
Well, thank you, Paul, and thank you for joining us for this video podcast. For more information, please visit the website shown here.